Andy Burnham has barely taken office as Britain's new Prime Minister, but one of the major reactions has come from former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. Speaking to the BBC, Corbyn welcomed Burnham's pledge to break what he called with decades of neoliberalism and trickle-down economics, saying those policies had failed Britain.
I welcome that, and yes, because trickle-down economics has failed this country. The levels of poverty are appalling, the levels of inequality are totally shocking. Billionaires owning a quarter of the nation's wealth is really not acceptable. So Andy has a very big agenda there. I hope he's able to fulfill it, because clearly a lot more detail is needed and we haven't yet had any.
Corbyn argued that poverty and inequality had reached unacceptable levels, pointing to the concentration of wealth among billionaires. He said Burnham now faced a huge agenda and hoped new government would deliver on its promises. He backed Burnham's commitment to end rough sleeping and homelessness, but said achieving that would require major funding from local authorities, stronger rent regulation, and a large-scale program of council house building.
That's absolutely the right thing to do. That'll mean a lot of resources have got to go straight away to local authorities. I hope he will also recognise that also means taking on some very big vested interests, such as rent regulation in the private rented sector, as well as proper council house building, not part building and part sale on sites that become available for development. There's an awful lot of issues there he's got to address.
Turning to public utilities, Corbyn also supported the idea of bringing water companies back into public ownership. He argued that nationalisation could be carried out by purchasing the companies while taking into account the environmental damage, excessive profits, and executive bonuses accumulated over years of privatization. Corbyn said water was a basic human necessity that should not remain under private control. He claimed around £72 billion had been extracted from the water industry in profits since privatization. Money, he said, that could have been invested in improving infrastructure rather than contributing to pollution in rivers and seas.
Based on the rest of us, by the clean-up after the mess that they've made, excessive profits that have been made, excessive bonuses have been paid. And so I think the cost is something that is essential, because we cannot go on not controlling a absolutely basic, essential human need of water. 72 billion has been taken out of the water industry by profits ever since privatisation started. That money could have paid for an awful lot of improved systems and redevelopment. Instead, what are we doing? Polluting seas and rivers.
The former Labour leader also addressed Britain's policy on Gaza. He welcomed Burnham's acknowledgement that Labour's previous response to the war had been a mistake, calling it an important first step. But Corbyn argued that a broader review of Britain's approach was needed. He pointed to his own bill calling for the public inquiry into UK's policy on Gaza, saying Britain had ended up on what he described as the wrong side of international law and morality. He also called on the government to change its policy on arms exports and intelligence cooperations with Israel.
Acknowledging they made a mistake over Gaza is a very important step forward. But it also requires, I think, an examination into the way the whole policy is developed on Gaza. I have a private member's bill before the House for a Gaza inquiry, a public inquiry, because somehow or other, Britain has ended up being on the wrong side of the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, the wrong side of morality. Well, 73,000 people have been killed in what is an act of genocide by the Israeli forces against the Palestinian people. I think he's got to change policy on arms supplies and security sharing with Israel.
On immigration, Corbyn strongly criticized reforms introduced under Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood. He said policies linking settlements and citizenships to new conditions had caused alarm among migrant workers, particularly those in health and care sectors. Corbyn urged the reappointed Mahmood to abandon the reforms immediately. He also warned Labour against trying to compete with Reform UK on immigration, arguing that adopting tougher rhetoric would only strengthen the party rather than weaken it. Instead, Corbyn said Britain should recognise the contributions migrants make, particularly to the NHS and the care system, arguing that both sectors heavily depend on workers who have come to the UK from abroad.
She's got to drop that. They've got to drop that straight away. Now, if she's no longer Home Secretary, the incoming Home Secretary can obviously undertake those changes. I know a lot of MPs, Labour, yes, but also other parties as well, and certainly all of the independent MPs, really are determined to get this whole policy changed. You can't keep on appeasing reform and not expecting reform to grow as a result of it. You've got to stand up against reform. Their arguments about immigration and migrants working in our public services are complete nonsense. Everybody knows the NHS and the care system relies on people.
The interview offered one of the clearest indications yet of how Labour's left wing hopes Andy Burnham's government will chart a different course on the economy, public services, foreign policy, and immigration.